Previously on Battlestar Galactica. No, I'm just playing, but if you haven't really seen it, you should. It's a great show. So I hope everyone's having a great summer so far. If you remember from last time, my name is Stephen Williamson and these are my cats. I can assure you that they are still doing the same thing now as they were during these pictures. Last time we also talked about Socrates and his search for certainty in the ancient world, and asked Socrates and his insistence on the role of probability in reasonable thought. Then Aristotle came along and synthesized their two trains of thought and made a complete science of argumentation, being on the one hand rhetorical and on the other logical, that is, formal and informal, deductive and inductive. He also discussed the definition of logic in their Aristotelian tradition as being simply the study of the standards for correct reasoning. In this video, I'd like to talk more about the genius of Aristotle and his logic. So after Aristotle died, generations studied him through the Greek times and then into Roman times and all the way through the Middle Ages, because Thomas Aquinas assigned Aristotle as the foundation of Catholic university study in the medieval world. So the logical study today in universities is a remnant of this logic tradition started by Aristotle. And this tradition is built around deductive reasoning. Now, a lot of us were taught that deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning are basically the same, just depending on which direction the argument flows, from general to particular. Unfortunately, this is actually wrong. Either type of argument can go in either direction. What makes an argument deductive is that there's a possibility of certainty. There are two characteristics of deductive reasoning. One is that it creates no new knowledge for us, and the other is that it's in the form of a premise and conclusion. So deductive reasoning may not create new knowledge, but it doesn't rearrange what we already know. And the fact that it's in premise and conclusion structure is pretty self-explanatory. However, the sentences that make up the premises and conclusions is something that Aristotle was very interested in. Now, he realized that every sentence in an argument needed to be a declarative sentence, and that each proposition, each sentence in an argument have two terms, here listed A and B. The first term being the subject of the sentence or the proposition, and the second being the predicate of the proposition. This gave us an easy way to define truth in the formal sense, truth being a matter of the subject agreeing with the predicate. So if the assertion being made in the predicate about the subject is in fact the case, it's a true proposition. And it's based on this fact that Aristotle built his whole system. Aristotle also realized that there are four types of declarative sentences. What he called type A is a universal affirmative. What he called type E is a universal negative. What he called type I is a particular affirmative. And what he called type O is a particular negative. Now I say what he called them, and that's probably misleading. These actually got the letters assigned to them in the Middle Ages because the word affirme in Latin, A and I are the two vowels in it, and the word nego, which is negate in Latin, E and O are the two vowels in it. So these categories go back to Aristotle, but these descriptions are medieval. But the important thing is that we have four types of sentences. The universal affirmative, such as all philosophers are mortal. The particular affirmative, such as some philosophers are mortal. The universal negative, all philosophers are not mortal. And the particular negative, some philosophers are not mortal. And if you look closely, they call it a square of oppositions because on the corners they can't both be true. So it can't be true that all philosophers are not mortal, as you see in E, and that some philosophers are mortal, as you see in I. Or that all A is B, as you see as a type A sentence, and some A are not B, as you see as a type O sentence. If you look across the top, you have contraries, meaning that they cannot both be true. It cannot be true that all cats are dogs, and also true that no cats are dogs. And then across the bottom, you have subcontraries. And subcontraries are called that because they can both be true, but they both cannot be false. So Aristotle also figured out that there's an interface for looking at these proposition sentences called a syllogism. And the syllogism is just the format that we were talking about that is a hallmark of deductive reasoning. That is a premise that is considered major, a premise that is considered minor, and a conclusion that's built on the major and minor premise. This particular type of syllogism is called a hypothetical syllogism because of the if, and, then. There are multiple types of syllogisms, but the one that we're familiar with the most is the categorical syllogism, such as all men are mortals, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is immortal. The classic categorical syllogism. And we can diagram that to see that the major premise is that all men are mortal, the minor premise that Socrates is a man, the conclusion therefore Socrates is a man. Socrates also realized that the terms being used in the declarative sentences that make up the minor, major, premise, and the conclusion are also very important in this discussion. He identified the subject of the conclusion as the minor term in an argument, and the predicate of the conclusion as being the major term in the argument. There's also a middle term in every argument that uses a syllogism. One of the important questions in Aristotle's mind is that what makes this argument that all humans are mortal, all Greeks are humans, therefore all Greeks are mortal, valid. However, this argument that all Greeks are human, all humans are mortal, therefore all mortals are Greeks, invalid. So Aristotle went back to the types of sentences and marked that all three of these are universal affirmatives in his words. And traditionally this is considered an argument that has the mood of A. And this one, for instance, on no reptiles have fur is an E statement. All snakes are reptiles is an A statement. Therefore, no snakes have fur is an E statement. This argument would be said to have the mood of E A, E. But being able to find the mood of arguments has not solved the problem of why some AAAs are valid and some AAAs are not valid, and that goes the same for other moods as well. But remember when I said that the terms were important, and that the subject of the conclusion is the minor term, the predicate of the conclusion being the major term, and that there was also a middle term. Knowing about the terms, we can see that this argument, all humans are mortal, all Greeks are human, therefore all Greeks are mortal, is the same as saying all middle term are major term, all minor term are middle term, therefore all minor term are major term. It's a tongue twister. But it is this arrangement of terms that's important, so important that it was Aristotle pointed out and called it a figure. He also figured out that there were 4 figures for valid reasoning. And in order to describe how the figures are laid out, you have to look at the major premise, and if the middle term comes first and the minor term comes first in the minor premise, then it's figure 1, and so on. So for instance, figure 3, the middle term comes first in the major premise, and the middle term comes first in the minor premise, then it would be figure 3. So we can look at an argument like this. All humans are mortal, all Greeks are human, therefore all Greeks are mortal. This would be an AAA argument in figure 1. Does that make sense? This one, some cats have no tails, is an O statement. All cats are mammals is an A statement. Therefore, some mammals have no tails is an O statement. And if we look at the figure, some cats is a middle term and it comes first in the major premise. And all cats is a middle term and it comes first in the minor premise. So this is figure 3. So it's an AOAO mood figure 3. The genius of Aristotle is that he figured all these figures out, and he realized that every possible combination of figure and mood ends up with 256 different possibilities. So here you can see on the left is a Venn diagram of an argument, and then on the right is the Venn diagram like that of every possible argument using the syllogistic structure. This means that Aristotle was able to figure out that there are 24 different valid syllogisms. Here we see a table. Unconditionally valid just means that they're valid in all cases. Conditionally valid just means that they're valid in most cases. There are special cases such as all unicorns have horns and arguments based on things that don't really exist. But those are more complex situations. But he also included a way to figure those out as well. This was so important in logical thinking that the monks of the Middle Ages came up with female names. And if you look at the 2 charts here, figure 1 AAA, the name Barbara is a mnemonic device for remembering that that's a valid argument. Barbara AAA in figure 1 is a valid argument, the same as all the other names on this list. So the next time we're going to talk about logic in the modern age and what it's good for, such as truth tables and the internet and making computers work. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the video.